Surprisingly, our last KVK, our first KVK in 1960, was probably the worst we've ever traded. Here's how my marches did. For context, we are only going to be pulling data from marches that got 10 million kill points or more, just to make sure that there's enough sample size to make sure that it is legitimate march data. Rest in peace to my Guan Yu and CPO Prime. Also, I'm going to be splitting up the data into when I had 6 marches versus when I had 7 marches. When I had 6 marches per pass 5, as well as altars, and when I had 7 marches per pass 7 and Kingsley. Alrighty, let us start off with the 6 march setup that I ran. In all honesty, I'm not the type of person to switch things up. I usually just set my presets, and then that will be what I use for the rest of the KVK. Although, for these 6 marches, I used 7 pairs. I used a 2-2-2 setup. So 2 archer marches, 2 cavalry marches, and finally, 2 infantry marches. For my archer marches, I used Zhuge Liang and Herman Prime, and Ashurbanipal with YSG. This is the gear I used on my Zhuge Liang. This is my primary archer set, so perhaps that is why the trades were a bit better. And this was the gear that I used on my Ashurbanipal YSG. Next, let us go into my cavalry marches. My 2 cavalry marches was Nevsky with Joan of Arc Prime and Huoqibing with William. I used my primary set with my Nevsky and Joan of Arc Prime because this was the damage combo, and then I used my secondary set on my Huoqibing with William because this was more so for the debuffs. Finally, for my infantry, this is where I experimented with the different pairs. I tried both Ragnar Prime with CPO Prime, and then CPO Prime with Ragnar Prime. The second infantry march alongside those 2 commanders was Liu Che and Alex. The Ragnar plus CPO pair had the best infantry gear, while my Liu Che and Alex had my secondary set. Alright, now let us rank these 7 marches based off who traded the worst versus who traded the best. My worst trading march out of these 7 pairs was Ashurbanipal and YSG. Actually, this march is the only march that traded negatively in terms of kill points and in terms of power. It traded 0.98 KP ratio, 0.98 kill ratio, as well as 0.98 power ratio, so 0.98 across the board. In all honesty, it's not the worst march to have as your worst trading march, barely being less than 1.0. Nonetheless, it is still my worst trading march this KVK. The march in 6th place is Huoqibing with William. Huoqibing traded 1.07 in terms of KP ratio, 1.09 in terms of kill ratio, and 1.07 in terms of power ratio. Overall, as I said, this is not really a surprise as well. This march's impact is more than just in the reports, but rather the debuff that it does for your overall murder ball and for your overall field. And it still traded pretty positively even with the secondary set of cavalry gear. So in all honesty, it traded pretty decently. The 5th march in terms of ratios is surprisingly Zhuge Liang and Herman Prime. Yes, Zhuge Liang and Herman Prime, which honestly I think is one of the best marches in the game. But Zhuge Liang and Herman Prime, when on the open field, gets to warm down a ton. Because of that, even with my best archer sets, it traded 1.23 KP ratio, 1.25 kill ratio, and 1.23 power ratio. All things considered, it still traded pretty decently, but in previous KVKs, this would be a 1 for 2 march or a 1 for 3 march, just showing the power of 2049 that we are versing against. The 4th march on the list is actually our first infantry march, which is crazy. That means my infantry marches were slapping in this part of the KVK. The 4th march being CPO Prime with Ragnar Prime. This march had a 1.28 KP ratio, 1.29 kill ratio, and 1.28 power ratio. So not too far ahead from the Zhuge Liang Herman Prime. This also had my best set of infantry gear and infantry armaments. So all things considered, pretty decent trading there. My 3rd march is actually my primary cavalry march, which was Nevsky with Joan of Arc Prime. Nevsky with Joan of Arc Prime traded a 1.33 KP ratio, 1.35 kill ratio, and 1.33 power ratio. Again, this is a Nevsky with Joan of Arc Prime that had my best cavalry gear, my best cavalry armaments, but it's good to see, at least in that stage of the KVK, that cavalry was still on top. For my 2nd best march in my 6 march setup, it is Ragnar with CPO Prime. Yes, this is the alternative march, which we switched with our 4th march, so CPO Prime with Ragnar Prime. this time with Ragnar primary and Scipio secondary. This March actually had more of a sample size and traded better. At 1.55 KP ratio, 1.58 kill ratio, and 1.54 power ratio. I will probably be using Ragnar Prime with Scipio Prime secondary moving forward, as this was enough of a sample size for me to decide which one I should be using personally. And finally, my best trading March in this stage of the KVK, the first half of the KVK, is Liu Che with Alex. Yes, Liu Che with Alex was my best trading March. And the craziest thing is, this is Liu Che with Alex with my secondary set of infantry gear. He traded at a 1.65 KP ratio, 1.71 kill ratio, and 1.64 power ratio. All things considered, a very strong March, and perhaps it was due to the fact that for the majority of this stage of the KVK, there was a lot of city hopping. There was a lot of Liu Che's with Alex with instant proc damage hitting me, so the only way to return the favor is to hit them back with instant proc yourself. So that's my hypothesis as why Liu Che and Alex was my best trading March in this stage of the KVK. But there you have it. That is my 7 Marches for my 6 March setup in the first half of KVK. Again, at 7th place, it's Asher Bonapal with YSG. In 6th place, it's Hua Qibing with William. In 5th place, it's Zhuge Liang and Herman Prime. In 4th place, it's Scipio Prime with Ragnar Prime. In 3rd place, it's Nevsky with Joan Prime. In 2nd place, it's Ragnar Prime with Scipio Prime. And finally, taking the crown is Liu Che and Alex. Now let's talk about the second half of KVK. This half of KVK in terms of marches was very turbulent, because not only did I transfer from 6 marches to 7 marches, but this is also when the swap event came live in Rise of Kingdoms. Meaning, I was able to get Arthur, the brand new commander that released, as well as Philip, one of the newer commanders that I was not able to invest in yet, and add that to my overall murder ball. I used a 3-2-2 setup. 3 cavalry marches, 2 archer marches, and 2 infantry marches. In Kingsland, I stabilized my murder ball to be Hua Qibing with Arthur, that having my primary cavalry sets, Nevsky with William, that having my secondary cavalry sets, and finally, Joan of Arc with Belisarius, that having my leadership set. For my archer marches, nothing actually changed, as I still used Zhuge Liang with Herman Prime, as well as Ashurbanipal with YSG. And finally, for my infantry marches, I used Ragnar with Scipio, as well as Liu Che with Philip replacing the Alex. Now let's get into the individual marches and where they ranked in terms of how they traded. In 7th place and last place, unsurprisingly, is Joan of Arc Prime with Belisarius Prime. The reason why it's unsurprising is because I used the leadership set, which has the least amount of stats, as well as my 3rd set of cavalry armaments, which should not see the light of day. I'd really need to work on my 3rd set of cavalry armaments. The Joan of Arc Prime with Belisarius Prime traded 0.81 KP ratio, 0.83 kill ratio, and 0.80 power ratio. So definitely a very underwhelming March, trading 0.8 to 1. In 6th place is Ashurbanipal with YSG, with a 1.03 KP ratio, 1.05 KP ratio, and a 1.03 power ratio. So this time in Kingsland, it traded pretty much 1 for 1. And a close 5th place is Nevsky with William, at a 1.07 KP ratio, 1.11 kill ratio, and 1.06 power ratio. Nevsky with William, very similar to the Hua Qibing with William, not doing the most amount of damage, but the William's debuffs and buffs kind of don't show on paper, and so it's no surprise that it is lower in the rankings. In 4th place is Zhuge Liang with Herman Prime. This time trading a little bit better at 1.28 KP ratio, 1.31 kill ratio, and 1.28 power ratio. Though it has improved from the other zone, it is still pretty surprising that archers, for me this KVK, was the worst trading troop type. In 3rd place is Ragnar Prime with Scipio Prime, at 1.53 KP ratio, 1.56 kill ratio, and 1.52 power ratio. So at this point, trading for 1 for 1.5 is super solid, especially seeing how the rest of my murder ball is doing. In 2nd place is the new commander that we swapped for with Hua Qibing. So it's Hua Qibing with Arthur. Hua Qibing Arthur trading 1.62 KP ratio, 1.66 kill ratio, and 1.62 power ratio. So a very, very strong March, and this is probably going to be the best Cav March for quite some time. And though it is the best Cav March, at least for me personally, it is not my best performing March in the game. The top spot going to Liu Che with Philip. Liu Che with Philip trading 1.78 KP ratio, 1.84 kill ratio, and 1.76 power ratio. Liu Che has always been a very, very solid commander, but with Philip, these two are a beast of a pair. Probably my favorite pair right now in Rise of Kingdoms. And there you go, that is my 7 marches that I used in Kingsland, ranked. Again, to recap, in 7th place is Joan of Arc Prime with Belisarius Prime. In 6th place is Ashwaubenon Paul with YSG. In 5th place is Nevsky with William. In 4th place is Zhuge Liang and Herman Prime. In 3rd place is Ragnar Prime with Scipio Prime. In 2nd place is Huoqi Bing with Arthur. And finally, in 1st place is Liu Che with Philip. And again, you could probably mix and match these commanders. You could probably put a relic and have a good pair. But at least for me, in this last KVK, these are the marches that perform the best. Now, I'm not saying that you should invest in all of these commanders in order, but hopefully this will be helpful for you as a data point in terms of figuring out what you personally want to invest in. If this gets up to 250 likes, perhaps we'll do an investment order tier list. Let me know what you guys think. And as always, shout out to Cubist Mike for the reports manager. The link to his Discord in case you want to use this tool will also be in the description. And I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.